If you were to ask me what one of the biggest aspects of Fire Emblem is, it would be the variety of characters and units you're provided. Each character is unique, and the variety of classes you're provided with can allow for a multitude of strategies. This, however, does come with its own variety of issues. Mainly, there are too many fucking characters. This is especially notable in the most recent titles. Recruited all the students in 3 houses for some unforsaken reason? Fuck you, they built the game around having like 10 characters, idiot. Are you like me and do really stupid challenges and engage only to realize they raise and lower the number of deployment slots to force you to use newer characters and give you a massive middle finger if you are some abomination who actually uses Faraday's units? Or maybe you're also like me and try to kill off excess units, and there's still more of them. Holy shit. Well, worry no more, because I have chosen to entirely remove this mechanic. Today, I've chosen to play Shadows of Valentia, and for those of you who don't know, character recruitment is basically a whole mechanic in this game. By this, I mean that most of the units you can use aren't actually required. Instead, you have to walk up to them and say, "Hey, I want you in my army." Now, this may not seem so bad. Most Fire Emblem games have a decent number of forced recruits. Well, ignoring your lords, Valentia has 10. And that's not even considering the fact that you're controlling 2 armies, journeying on separate sides of the continent. To be clear, I don't know how the challenge will go yet. I'm actually writing the script as I go along, and I'm splitting everything into acts. As far as I know, this challenge will be perfectly doable until I reach Act 2. Once we run into certain enemies, I worry a bit for the viability of this run. But until then, let's see how this goes. Now, the game opens up with a fun little cutscene of Celica dying. Promptly choosing to ignore this, we are then greeted by the worst things in existence. Children. Ignoring all the foreshadowing that's going on in the prologue, it acts as a quick tutorial on walking and fighting. Mycen forcibly recruits us into the baby war and teaches us one of the most valuable aspects of the game, terrain, which increases your avoidance, and it's freaking overpowered if you know how to deal with it. As the children huddle up in the corner to cry, Old Man Mycen handles the knights, and now Celica's gone. With the tutorial completed, we now begin Act 1 of the game, where we control a much older Alm. Lucas comes along and recruits us to the Deliverance. Gray and Tobin decide to join along as well, making these 3 our first required recruits. This point in the game is also meant to be a tutorial on recruiting extra units by talking to them in towns. However, that is not allowed in this challenge, so we abandon Cliff and Faye. Now, this isn't so bad because I usually make these 2 my squishy mages. However, I'll let you guys in on a secret. There are no required mages or healers in Alm's route. In fact, none of the proper healers in this game are required. Remember how I said terrain is important? Well, magic has a base accuracy that ignores avoidance. You need magic to kill people in terrain with high avoidance. Otherwise, you will be bludgeoned to death while trying and failing to hit the enemy. Also, I can't heal. I guess I should mention that too. This is all fine for now, as we aren't even meant to have mages or healers yet. And as we set out into our first few battles, things run smoothly enough. Making use of forest tiles makes it difficult for the enemy to hit even my villagers, which makes me think this is a good time to introduce our current party. Alm is a fighter, and the lord of this army. He's actually our strongest fighter to start off with, and has pretty decent growths to back him up. Next is Lucas, a soldier. This is our tank of the party, having low movement and speed, but high attack and defense. He's not the greatest unit in the game, but he's one of the few we'll get. Without access to warp, it'll be difficult for him to keep up with my other units, so I'll likely have to make everyone work around him. Gray is one of our villager units. The nice thing about villagers is that they can class into any non-unique class. Gray has a hard time making use of this though, with his good HP and attack, but mediocrity in all else. As such, it'll be best to turn him into a mercenary to make up for his speed. Tobin, on the other hand, is our villager with the best speed and skill. This can provide him with a decent advantage in a large variety of classes, and because I won't be gaining any mages in Alm's army, I plan on turning Tobin into the party mage. With this all decided, we easily dispatch the first 2 map battles and head into the nearby shrine. I find an iron sword in a chest and hand it over to Gray to help him match Alm's damage. Once we reach the depths of this shrine, a brigand stands in our way trying to stop the nearby cleric from joining our party. I politely tell him that I have the free will to reject people from my party, and he decides to back off. As thanks for saving her, Silk hands us Mella's turnwheel, which promptly traumatizes Alm. For such an act, she's denied from joining our army because... what the fuck, man? The actual reason we came here was not for Silk, but to use the shrine and upgrade our villagers. With a mercenary and mage now on our side, we can head out and make our way to the southern outpost. In Ram Village, we start to run into actual strategy. At this point, I have far fewer units than usual, not to mention a lack of healers. However, this is where I can truly start to take advantage of 2 major quirks in this game. The first is with tile avoidance. By sticking all my units on the edge of the mountain, they can dish out damage while the enemy has a hard time hitting them. This is also useful for trapping the mercenary as he chases Tobin. Since Tobin is a mage, he can take advantage of the mountainous terrain while ignoring any benefits the mercenary gains. The second quirk at play here is a fun little thing in AI's programming. See, when an enemy is at low health, they will prioritize healing over attacking if there's a place on the map they can heal. This is likely to prevent enemy mages from standing still and being useless when they don't have enough HP to fight, as, for those who aren't aware, magic costs health to cast. This can be taken advantage of by creating an enemy phase dynamic, where you build a defensive wall, let the enemies weaken themselves on you, and then attack them. Not only does this make it easy to kill multiple of them, but it means that any enemies you didn't defeat are likely to retreat to a healing tile, easing the assault on your army. After clearing the valley by taking advantage of these quirks, we enter a fight just outside the southern outpost. This battle takes on a very standard form. Lucas acts as defense, and Tobin's magic clears out annoying enemies inside the walls. Once the outpost is cleared, we're required to enter and save Claire. Any attempts to move on without her will be blocked by Lucas. Inside the outpost, we recruit Claire, but more importantly, we find the lightning sword. While this sword has fixed damage, it is magic damage, and res in this game is notoriously non-existent. Of course, Claire is also quite useful. She's the only Pegasus Knight Alm gets, assuming you don't use Fae or turn her into a Pegasus Knight. With high speed and a flying advantage, she can be fairly useful depending on the situation, and she gets decent resistance to boot. As we enter our next battle, we now run into a new issue, a map with little defensive terrain. Right above us is a large troop of soldiers, and off to the left is a cavalier. It's best to handle these soldiers before the cavalier reaches us, so I opted for a new strategy. Without the boon of terrain, I grouped everyone into a cross formation with Tobin in the center. While Tobin does have the highest defense thanks to the shield he picked up, it's important to keep in mind that each attack of his costs HP, not to mention that there's no such thing as zero damage. If an attack connects, it will do at least 1 damage. This grouping strategy ends up working well, as I'm able to handle most of the soldiers before the cavalier arrives, and I'm easily able to pick off the stragglers. The next battle acts as a tutorial to fighting cavalry proper. This map starts with 2 nearby cavaliers and an additional 4 across the river. Luckily, all of them are on the opposite side of the map, giving me time to regroup my army in a beneficial position. I choose to first remove of the 2 nearby cavaliers to clear the map on our side of the river. Next, I took advantage of the river. See, there's only one bridge that goes over the river, and cavalry can't cross any water tiles. By positioning Lucas in front of the bridge, the enemy is forced onto a choke point, unable to cross the river. This allows Tobin and Gray, with the help of the lightning sword, to pick off one cavalier at a time. With the battle over, we're forced to go to the Deliverance hideout. There's not much of note that happens in this dungeon, but Lucas does reach a high enough level to reclass. However, I choose to hold off on this. While trying to maximize your levels is pretty pointless in this game due to pitiful growth rates, I still want to take advantage of as many levels as possible when I only have 5 units in my party. For reaching the end of the dungeon, Clive forces himself into our party. This is the last forced recruit Alm will get until the final act of the main story. Clive is okay. He'll basically be our only cavalier and has decent attack. They're better cavaliers, but all of them are optional, so he's kind of just here as another body. Still, I won't look a gift horse in the mouse, so I gladly take him along for the battle for Sophia Castle. Now, sieging the castle seems a bit daunting at first with the defensive position the enemy has. Archers defend the thin pathway into the main area. However, with the help of Claire, we're able to sneak around the archers and break in along the wall. This allows us to take out the enemies up here to make a safe area to retreat back to if needed. Once cleared up, I start slowly grabbing enemy cavalier aggro. By baiting one cavalier at a time, I can make sure my small numbers can easily handle the enemy without getting overwhelmed. Of course, once Slade is defeated, Desai runs away with his Draco shield, but he'll be an issue for another day. The biggest issue of the map is the Arcanist. As I've said before, resistance is non-existent in this game. The Arcanist is entirely capable of wiping out most of my units, so the enemy had to be carefully baited out and quickly defeated from there. With the battle cleared, Alm greets the people of Zofia, and Act 1 of the game ends.
And so it was that Zofia Castle was liberated from Desai's clutches, causing the Zofian people to greet their new hero with raucous cheers. However, what Alm did not and could not know was that his victory here was but the prelude to a longer and far more bitter conflict.
Act 2 starts off with Celica waking up from the worst nightmare of her life, a lord dying and failing their Iron Man. Wanting to prevent Alm from failing his Iron Man run, she sets off with May and Bowie tagging along. As per tradition, we ignore Jenny because she's an optional healer. Yay! Entering our first battle, we're finally given our tutorial on magic. While we're here, I may as well introduce the team. Celica is our lord and a warrior priestess. They ended up majorly buffing her stats and echoes, making her one of the strongest units in the game, especially with her high attack growth. Add that to her ability to use swords, black magic, and white magic, and you've got yourself a good all-around unit. Her ability with swords is extra useful as she won't waste her health when doing a counterattack on enemy phase, opting to use her sword over magic. May has also been buffed since Gaiden. She's a mage with low HP, but it's made up for with high attack and speed. She's basically the glass cannon of the group. Bowie, on the other hand, acts as the other side of the coin to May. With low speed and skill, but decent defense and HP, he acts as a more defensive mage. Which is weird, but I'll take it, I guess. Once we clear out the graveyard, we enter the nearby port town and get a ride over to the mainland. However, we're denied access without a proper team to fight off the pirates. As such, we're forced to recruit Saber and are finally allowed to move on. Entering our first battle with pirates, I once again use my strategy where one unit blocks a bridge and the others attack from afar. Saber takes the place of our wall here, so I may as well go over him now. Saber will be Celica's second to last unit. Yes, you heard me right, we only get 5 units in Celica's army. Saber's role here is as our only true melee unit for now, and with his high defense and HP growths, he'll have to act as our main defensive unit. God help me. This is still a pretty normal team for now, minus the lack of Jenny, and they make easy work of the pirates. The second pirate battle is a bit harder thanks to the archer and layout of the map, but we managed to scrape by, even if May was at 1 HP. Man, do I love mages in this game. After clearing 2 sea maps, we reach land to defeat Barth. Normally you're supposed to help Volbar and his crew in order to recruit them. I don't care for them. They stole my kills and the beef Barth was holding. I don't appreciate that, so I abandoned them. The next map has the main enemy I've been dreading for this challenge run, Cantors. Usually there's only 1 or 2 of them on a map, if any, but things can spiral wildly out of control if you don't handle them quickly. This is because they can infinitely spawn new enemies. This could be useful for level grinding, but remember, I have mages. We essentially have a soft timer. However, this brings another vital mechanic into play. After 3 turns have passed, you can retreat from a battle. This allows you to reset the map, removing summons but keeping any kills you've gotten. I choose to retreat once to take advantage of this and change my strats to be more aggressive, easily killing the Cantor on my second go-around. Because that battle shook me a bit, I chose to do some quick grinding. This is mostly because Celica learned Seraphim at level 5, and I thought it'd be nice since I always enjoy entering the Seabound Shrine. My decision paid off as taking out the Necro Dragon got me a Blessed Ring, which gives the wearer HP recovery every turn. When 3 of my units are mages, you can see the appeal, not to mention that deep in the shrine is a blessed sword that Saber can make use of. And it should be noted that Celica's army tends to deal with a lot of terrors. Continuing down the main path, I started to enter autopilot as the pirate battle is more of the same old stuff we've already dealt with. The next battle has slightly more going on as it's a ship full of Arcanists we have to fight, but it's still pretty easy thanks to Celica's party starting off with decent resistance. From here, we can head over to Zofia Castle to meet Alm and... oh, I forgot about this battle. It's still doable thanks to Celica's Plentitude art with her dagger and a lucky critical. I was just caught unprepared. With that, we can finish off Act 2 as Celica and Alm have their touching reunion, only to argue about Alm being stupid for taking on an Iron Man run or something.
Alm and Celica's heartfelt reunion was dashed by heated words, and once again the two were parted. One chose the battlefield, the other, the mother's succor. And while they both sought to attain peace in their own way, their chances of finding it together seemed to grow increasingly slim.
After splitting up, the 2 armies are now permanently kept apart thanks to a rock slide. From here on, I have the choice to control both armies at once, and take on each challenge at my own pace. However, I find it easiest to focus on one army at a time, so I choose to deal with Alm's troubles first. Our first battle leads us to Fernand, who tells Clive that Alm isn't all he seems. However, I'm less worried about the story and more worried about the introduction of witches. They suck to deal with when you have no resistance, and they have the ability to warp across the map. Only one of these witches has the teleportation ability, but I chose to tread carefully nonetheless. With my units woefully underprepared thanks to not promoting them, I decided to make use of retreat tactics. Making use of the first 3 turns, I try to eliminate as many of the archers and knights by the bridge before promptly making my retreat. When I return to the battlefield, those who I've already filled are permanently gone, leaving Fernand and his cavaliers, the witches, and the commander. Fernand has been moved over to the bridge now that the knights are mostly gone, but this is fine as I had given Claire the Rider's Bane I'd found in Zofia Castle, allowing for easy handling of cavaliers. Less desirable was the matchup of the commanding knight and 2 witches. Despite one witch having the teleportation ability, she strangely didn't make use of it. Still, with a bit of luck and finagling, I managed to lure these enemies out and handle them without having to do a second retreat. The next map is a far simpler one where you fight a group of Arcanists in a forest. The big issue here is trying to fight enemies whose attacks ignore terrain effects, all while trying to make sure they don't benefit from the terrain. Thankfully, Tobin and Claire are good at handling these enemies with their magic and resistance respectively. Afterwards, we have a run-in with Berkut. Here he actually manages to do something to uncover Alm's brand, a smart way of getting across important story information to other characters. Keep this in mind for later. Whatever the case, we find ourselves in a battle against 3 units. This doesn't seem so bad until you realize the enemy is 2 paladins and a cavalier. And once again, my units are woefully underclassed. To the north, I have Claire and Clive, while to the south, I have my remaining units. To deal with this map, I send my units off into the forest to give them their best chances at survival. Thankfully, Berkut and the Paladin attack my larger force, while Fernand runs after Claire and Clive. After a couple of turns of defense, I'm able to whittle down the enemy and take them out, earning a blessed ring for Tobin to make sure he never runs out of HP. There is a village nearby that we can visit after the battle, with Luthier there as a recruitable unit, but we ignore him as we're busy ransacking the village before leaving. It's not like he had anything important to say anyways. Up next is Dessay's fortress. The idea of this fight is to kill the enemy before the archers and Cantor can kill Matilda. Saving her here is completely optional though, as we don't have to recruit her, meaning I have all the time in the world to handle this fight. I end up creating a defensive formation on the steps to lure out the knights and archers, only for them to get eviscerated by Tobin's magic. The witch in the forest is also a bit of a problem, but I end up bringing her HP low enough that she can't use her thunder magic. Funnily enough, she only teleports after I bring her to critical health, and chooses to stand in the corner of Matilda's prison cell for some time. Still, that gives me one less thing to worry about as I slowly remove the knights. Eventually, as they clear out, I send Claire up to remove the Cantor. Due to falling to critical health, he leaves his corner to try and heal, bringing him out into the open for my other units to kill. And the witch teleports over to him? Whatever the case, neither of them get the chance to heal before getting taken out, and the map is cleared with Matilda surviving. This acts as the perfect chance to rob Dessay blind and take the royal sword for Alm. It's not like Dessay can use it, being dead and all. Matilda is also here, but I decided safest to just keep her in her cell. Someone will give her food, right? As we move forward, we run into a large party of cavaliers. Due to giving Claire the Rider's Bane, I chose to have her alone on one side of the map, slowly baiting the enemies over to my other units and taking out anyone who tries to attack her. The others are sent to huddle up in the forest, hoping that RNG plays in their favor as I rely on evasion to keep them alive. This works well enough as the enemy seems to really like attacking Clive and Alm. Alm has the benefit of the royal sword healing him, and Clive's decent defense alongside the ability to steal provisions from Alm allows him to survive. Due to being so pitifully worse than the enemy, this battle becomes one of endurance. One where my army thankfully outlives the enemy without having to use retreat tactics. I know that retreat is an option, and a powerful one at that, but I do want to minimize how much I use it. Because of this, when I leave the battle, I choose to do some level grinding. I want to get all my units to level 20 now, as there's a dungeon with a Milla statue nearby. Doing so will allow me to get the most out of my units' levels before promoting them to the next class. With the grind over, everyone except Alm is promoted, as Alm's secondary class will be unlocked later in the story. With this new buff to my strength, we march forward into a battle with a ton of archers and some witches. This is much easier to manage than the previous battles, though I still have to be careful not to accidentally kill someone. The real challenge comes with the battle at the sluice gate. In fact, this battle is pretty difficult even if you play the map normally. Usually you want to kill Tatara before Delthea kills you, since she can be a pretty useful unit to recruit. However, this makes her an optional recruit, and thus her fate doesn't matter in this battle. On my first attempt, all was going well until Delthea teleported directly behind me and killed Gray with a crit. On reloading, I wanted to mess around and see what triggers witches to teleport. I ended up going much longer without Delphia choosing to simply kill someone, as I got her to participate in a game of chase. I wanted to challenge myself to keep her alive while sending Claire off to kill Tatara, but his death spell was just too dangerous, doing more than half Claire's health. I eventually tired of our little game and punished Delphia when she finally chose to teleport. With only Tatara left in his hidey hole, I remembered that Ulm's ultimate art with the Royal Sword has an additional 2 range to its attack. Using it, I was able to take Tatara down. Now that Ulm's enemies have been cleared, we can enter the sluice gate. However, we can't do anything until the sluice at the Temple of Mila has been opened. So now we must return to Celica's army in order to advance. On her side of the continent, we run into bandits harassing Palla and Catria. Because Catria is one of the best units in the game, she manages to wipe most of the units in the upper right corner of the map with some help from Bowie and Palla. Honestly, watching her fight made me really wish I wasn't doing this run, because she truly is one of my favorite units as a Pegasus Knight enjoyer myself. Still, despite the map being about helping the two out of a rough spot, they kinda needed no help from me before moving on to the next map. If only they were able to talk to Celica. But I guess our lord here truly embodies the spirit of this run. Next, we have to get through the graveyard, loot a village, and then fight our way back through that graveyard. Great. To minimize backtracking, I head east towards Greith's Citadel. Our first challenge along this path is Wolf, a sniper who surrounds himself with archers. The most annoying part of this map is all the sand that slows down our movement, making it take forever to reach the fortress. Luckily, this consumes plenty of turns, allowing for easy retreat strats that I gladly make use of. 2 go-rounds is enough to handle Wolf, though I almost had to make a 3rd attack thanks to the terror that is his steel bow. Greith ends up getting news of our attack. Now, I hope you remember what I said about Ulm's brand being revealed earlier, because guess what? Greith learns about Celica's brand. I don't know how though, as she very clearly wears gloves, and I don't think there's ever a moment that makes show of unmasking Celica's brand. But the game doesn't care. You know what it does care about? Stopping us. So Greith sends out Dean and Sonia to stop us. Now, this is usually a choice given to the player between gaining another Myrmidon or gaining another mage in their party. However, I don't get to recruit either of them, so this choice is really about whatever item I can loot off their corpses. Now, I'll be honest, I've never fought Sonia. I always kill Dean, and that's what I do here. I don't want to fight a mage in the desert, but I will gladly destroy a group of mercenaries to earn a brave sword. If you know Fire Emblem, you would expect a brave sword to double your attacks. But in Gaiden, it actually has the effect of raising your crit rate like a killing edge. Whatever the case, this is a powerful weapon for Saber's arsenal. I did have to use retreat strats here after the damage Dean dealt to me, but funnily enough, allowed me to learn something about this game. If you retreat from Dean or Sonia's encounter after killing one of them, the other character's encounter will entirely retreat from the field, meaning you can ignore the remaining units from the encounter you fled. I still chose to return to take care of Dean's troops for the fun of it, though. And it's here that I have to make an admission. I've done this challenge before, albeit it was a few years ago and I only made it as far as Act 4, but I say this because I know that the battle in Greith's Citadel is going to be hell. With how fights have been going, I decided to do some level grinding now, despite having wanted to hold off until the end of the act. I brought everyone up to level 19, and took my shot at the battle against Greith. When I entered the field, he had one of his overruled reinforcements still next to him, so the battle started off with an additional 10 units. While this may seem bad, this is actually a blessing in disguise. You see, in order to prevent the 3DS from imploding, they set an enemy limit. You'd understand this if you ever dealt with canters on legit hardware. The slowdown is very real. The 2 major issues of this map are 1 canter in the back and 3 witches. However, as 30 units is over the usual enemy limit, the Cantor is unable to summon reinforcements. While this comes with the downside of 10 units immediately rushing me in addition to the witches and any other immediate aggro units, it gives me plenty of time to think. Thanks to my high HP and defense, the bandits are little danger to Celica and Saber, and the witches luckily group together with only one teleporting. This allowed me to easily take out the witches before the map could spiral out of my control. May and Bowie took on crowd control duty and removing ranged units so Celica and Saber could lead the charge into the Citadel. It's here that I realized that Celica actually has a higher defense than Saber at the moment, so I equipped her with the Blessed Sword for HP regen and to help deal with the terrors the Cantor was now able to spawn. We eventually pushed through all the terrors and aggroed Grief, allowing May to finish him off and easy access to kill the Cantor. From here, it was just a case of baiting the last 2 units on the side of the map I hadn't touched. I was actually kind of surprised I got through the battle without having to make use of retreat strats. Like, I tend to make use of them even when I take on this map normally. As my reward, I get to plunder the Citadel. I obviously had to ignore Sonya and Est, as I clearly don't need another mage or the best unit in the game. From here, I forge the Golden Dagger into beloved Zofia, and upgrade Saber's Brave Sword. It's when I head to the battle up north that I sort of realize they may have intended for the player to take the battles up north before tackling anything to the west. However, I disagree because I hate backtracking. Also, love this dude's horrible hairdo. I decide to head into the Dragon Shrine in order to promote my units since they've all reached level 20 now. Since May can use swords as a priestess now, I equip her with the Blessed Sword, giving all my mages recovery. Also, everyone but Saber now has a healing spell, which is nice. Beyond the Necro Dragon in the dungeon, I found the Coral Ring, which is a nice upgrade to Bowie's Blessed Ring. And for those unaware, there's a fountain back here that can recover a dead unit, which I don't need because I like keeping my 4 units alive. From here, we head out for Celica's final battle in Act 3 of the game. Because the boss summoned reinforcements on the map, there are 3 paladins added to the battle, but they're nothing to worry about. The major issue with this battle is that there are a ton of Arcanists and a Cantor who summons gargoyles. Gargoyles may be weak, but they're annoying time wasters. Normally, I would use Catria or Est to fly over the wall and open the door so the Cantor can be dealt with immediately, but as I have no flyers, I have to go the long way. This means running into the Arcanists and taking them out while gargoyles regularly bother me. It works, but it takes forever before I can work through all of the enemies and make it to the Cantor. What's usually a 5-minute map for me is dragged out for almost half an hour thanks to these stupid gargoyles. Upon entering the temple, we learn that our dragon is in another castle. Masked Dude shows up with a circlet that Celica can promote to her princess class. This gives her the authority to open the temple's sluice, and thus allows Alm to open the sluice gate on his side of the continent, thus ending Act 3.
Through the combined efforts of Alm and Celica, the Empire's plans to flood Zofia were thwarted. The arc of her destiny now clear, Celica embraced her identity and set forth. Meanwhile, Alm, having learned his friend was in truth Zofia's Princess Antise, renewed his own oath to defend Zofia from the Regelian Empire. However, a dark creature had his own plans for these fated children who bore the brand.
Just like with Act 3, Act 4 starts off with the option between continuing on as Alm or Celica. This time, I chose to continue Celica's story first. This is because doing so unlocks Alm's promotion. As we head forward, we walk directly into my least favorite map in the game. Welcome to Celica's Swamp Adventure, featuring everyone's favorite mechanic, Poison Swamps! She truly did Dark Souls before it was cool. Our first swamp map requires us to trudge through the swamp, taking damage every turn in order to fight the enemies, and to spice it up there are 3 Cantors, one of which summons gargoyles. Still, the map's super manageable with my current party, just mildly annoying. Up next is more swamp, Graveyard Edition. Luckily, it's just Necro Dragons though, so they'll fly towards me and die immediately. Kinda easy with a blessed weapon and 2 Seraphim users. With that done, we move on to another staple RPG level, the sewers. Technically it's a poison swamp keep, but it has massive sewer vibes to me. We once again have the issue of having to cross a swamp to get to the enemy. However, it's manageable enough. The big issue here is that the boss summons Necro Dragons. I hope I don't have to explain why that's a problem. Once everyone else is taken care of though, it becomes an easy beeline to the boss. And for completing this map, we gain Celica's final unit, Conrad. Our late addition to the party is a paladin, providing Celica with her only mounted unit. As a unit added just for the Echoes release, Conrad comes with surprisingly good growth rates, and as a late game unit, he comes with solid stats. Especially nice is the high resistance stat of 12, not to mention he joins equipped with a Blessed Lance, which is especially useful for one in Celica's party. After traversing the forest, we end up in the Sage's Hamlet. By talking to Halcyon, we unlock Alm's class promotion and get a touching moment with him. Once we leave, we head into a map that may be familiar to Awakening players. Now, this map is a bit of a problem. You may think that the reason is the 9 witches on the map. Well, it isn't. They're pretty easy, as all of them just have thunder magic and all of my units have decent resistance. No, the big issue here that I wasn't prepared for is the boss. You see, he has a skill called Upheaval. This is a magic attack that costs no HP and does a random amount of damage to all my party members. I was not aware that he had the skill because I usually defeat the boss quickly. But if y'all haven't noticed, I have very few units, and over half of them have shit movement. Still, I managed to push my way in and send my physical fighters up north to catch the enemy from behind. Because of the funky layout of this map, I was able to make use of my mages to attack most of the enemies through the walls. This allowed me to make quick work of the boss and canter once the dread fighters were out of the way. From there, it was just a simple bit of cleanup. For handling this map so well, I then get the honor of fighting Jeddah. I hate this map. Jeddah can summon moguls, and if you didn't know, moguls have the ability to copy themselves. Still, I tried my best to handle this battle, with May clearing out the few enemies on the western side of the map. I expected I was going to need to use retreat strats, but I ended up seeing something I normally don't, which was Jeddah moving towards me on the land. I was prepared to kill him once all the enemies were cleared from the map, but then Jeddah taught me something new. He can apparently choose to simply end the battle and run away. I didn't know this. I thought you had to kill him. I always killed him. Are you telling me all my past suffering was for naught? Whatever the case, I now have the option to explore Duma Tower and finish Celica's story. However, I chose to refrain from doing so. The issue here is that the moment I reach the top of the tower, Celica's army will become entirely unavailable to me until the final boss. So I want to get any necessary grinding done now. Only once everyone is at level 20 do I enter Duma Tower. Thankfully there's a Milla statue on the first floor, so I'm able to promote Saber and Conrad to their 3rd tier classes. This is super useful for Saber especially, since Dread Fighters come with extra resistance and have magic damage. Also, hey, I'm in the game. Nice. Anyways, back to the matter at hand. Celica's story ends with a final dungeon crawl. The tower spans 4 floors with a forced encounter at the end of each. These encounters get progressively harder as you rise up the tower, but thankfully the devs weren't completely evil, and there's a fountain to cure fatigue. While I slash my way up the tower, we run into our first forced encounter, the Fiend. This is basically the terror version of a Baron, and is easily handled with a Seraphim spell from Celica or May. The Dread Fighters are pretty simple at this point, and the Arcanists are no trouble for Saber now, so this battle goes by without a hitch. The second forced battle is a Necro Dragon. Once again, a pretty simple affair with my current abilities. There is a Bonite, which one might assume to be the biggest problem here with how pathetic Necro Dragons are now, but the issue here is actually the Gargoyles. We've now entered a point in the game where gargoyles and revenants come with special abilities. Some gargoyles may have the ability to silence you, while some revenants have claws that can poison or freeze you. The third forced battle is with a Bone Knight. Here they're joined by some Necro Dragons and Bone Walkers. It's once again more enemies we've seen before, just with buffed stats. They're simple enough to handle by letting my units huddle together and take out any enemies that approach us, though. The final battle of Celica's Path is a Mogul on the 4th floor of the tower. This deals with a wide array of enemies, so I decide to systematically take the enemy out from left to right. Doing so got rid of the witches immediately and prevented me from spreading myself too thin. This did, of course, have the potential issue of not defeating the Moguls fast enough before they multiply out of control, but it worked in my favor. With the tower summit reached, Celica is taken hold of by Jedha, and we're left with only one army under our control. We now must finish the game with Ulm's team. So, as we enter Ulm's first battle of Act 4, I come to a realization. While Ulm might have more forced recruits than Celica, his route is much more reliant on large-scale battles. I'm stuck on a large map with little cover on my side, while my small team has to fight off 20 units. While this can be manageable in more modern Fire Emblem games, having few units is like a death sentence in Echoes. Thankfully, the enemies choose to move out in waves, making my life much easier. As the knights are first to move, it makes it easy for me to control their advance by luring them towards characters like Lucas and Clive. Claire is then easily able to halt the advance of paladins thanks to her Rider's Bane. Keeping my units grouped together was vital for victory, as it meant each unit could help one another. Once the knights and snipers were cleared, I began to clear out the arcanists, though this is around when Berkut and his paladins began to move. I was luckily able to strategize on the fly and lure the paladins away from the arcanists so I could easily take them out without being magicked to death. With Berkut down, all that was left was some cleanup, and the map was easily finished. Up next, Rigel Forest. It's not that bad. Yes, there are a ton of witches, but I've begun to feel confident in my ability to take them on, even with a small team like this. There are also Myrmidons here, but there's even less to say about them. I was starting to feel overconfident in my ability around now, so I decided to take on Nuibaba's Abode. This isn't really necessary unless I want to recruit Zeke, but I was interested in the challenge, and oh boy, did we start out with a challenge. Now, y'all know cantors and witches by now, right? Two of the most annoying enemies in this game, if you ask me. Well, what if you combine them into one character? That sounds cheap and annoying? Too bad, say hi to Marla. Since this map is full of knights and barons, it's usually easily handled by having things like paladins or bone knights. I have one paladin and a Pegasus knight. Everyone else is stuck at 4 or 5 movement. So I had to take this map slowly, which is a bad idea when the boss keeps summoning witches. That doesn't mean it's impossible, though. By sending Ulm south and the rest of the army north, I'm able to clear out most of the excess units to help make my life easier. While this might usually seem stupid, Ulm has really good defense at this point, and his bow allows him to easily defend himself should a witch teleport to him. In fact, it's best if more witches teleport to Ulm, as it keeps them away from my other units. This tactic doesn't exactly work out if you're planning on taking out the enemy in one fell swoop, though. I take too long and it gets to a point where there are just too many witches to handle. But the point here was just taking out as many troops as possible before retreating. When I return for round 2, the enemy is now much more manageable. In this state, I'm able to rush the boss and easily take out the witches who are spawned. I end up realizing that unlike cantors, Marla will choose to attack over summoning if you're in her range. I take advantage of this by using Claire to lure her out, and I'm easily able to complete the map from there. Up next is Nuibaba's Abode, and oh boy is this a map. It's not necessarily a hard map if you have the tools to tackle it and understand how it works, but it sure is annoying and time-consuming. See, Nuibaba's Abode is atop a mountain. Mountain terrain is navigable by all units except cavalry, though it slows down most movement. So it's best to take the long way around to enter from the back. The biggest issue here is Nui Baba herself, though. Her Medusa spell will instantly bring a person down to 1 health when it hits, and kills if it hits someone at 1 health. This is a lot less scary than it seems, though. It's impossible for her to double anyone, so it's completely safe if she attacks a person. Though since there's no such thing as 0 damage unless an attack misses, it's vital to remove all other enemies from the map before reaching Nui Baba. This is easier said than done when the enemy's huddled atop the mountain with her, but with a careful baiting strategy using mostly Claire and Alm, I'm able to remove every unit except the Cantor from Nui Baba's attack range and take them out. When only Nui Baba and the Cantor are left, I can send in Claire and Alm to remove the Cantor, leaving only Nui Baba. As she can only attack once per enemy phase, this battle is now completely safe. Even if someone were to get hit, Tobin has Physic to bring them back above 1 HP. Which I didn't even need as Grey dodged Medusa and Alm finished Nui Baba off. With that fun little detour done, it's time to march on the Empire proper. Up next, Jerome and Zeke. Usually you're supposed to bring along Tatiana, who you rescued from Nui Baba's abode. I might have left her in the dungeon. If she were here, Zeke would become a green unit and his army would fight off Jerome alongside you. I do not get that privilege. Thankfully, there's another strat I can use. Some of you might notice that there's a river with a single bridge keeping our armies apart. I intend to use that to my advantage. Unbeknownst to me, Gold Knights can actually cross rivers, which clearly caught me off guard. Still, I managed to pull myself together and remove the Gold Knights quickly. Doing so allowed me to continue my usual strat of trapping the enemy on the other side of the river, as Paladins and Bow Knights still haven't learned the water walking ability. Just after this battle is a village free for me to loot, but more importantly, I take a moment at the blacksmith to forge a rapier for Grey. As nice as a brave sword would have been, I felt a rapier would be more useful, as a lot of the Regalian opponents we're fighting are armored and cavalry. Now, I've got a question for y'all. What do you think is my least favorite map? Fear Mountain? Nui Baba's abode? One of Celica's poison swamps? Wrong, it's Regale Falls. I'll be honest, this is an innocent enough looking map at first, but there are about 500 things wrong with it. First, you start off in a pincer position. Not great, but not the worst. I can fight my way out of this, and I do. There's also a Cantor near the boss, but he only summons gargoyles. That's fine. I am cut off from the rest of the map by a mountain with one thin stairway to get up, but I've played plenty of Fates. I can manage all of these. However, we then have to combine them with 2 of the worst design decisions I've ever seen in a Fire Emblem game, and I end up wanting to tear my hair out. See, right by the boss across the map from you is Hestia. Just like Marla, she's an arcanist that summons witches. Wonderful. But to make it even better, you have to cross a river to reach the boss, and a good number of enemies around the boss, such as Hestia and the Cantor. And guess what? There's no bridge to cross this river. I hope you have units that can cross river tiles. The Arcanists are there to add extra spice to the river crossing mix. Of my 6 units, only 3 of them can cross the river, those being Claire, Alm, and Grey. The others are trapped on the other side, unable to do anything but draw witch aggro. Thankfully, I obtained a mage ring from killing Nui Baba. Equipping this on Tobin gives his black magic a greater attack range, allowing him to snipe the blockade on the other side of the river. Since getting to the river took way too long, I chose to simply destroy the blockade and retreat. From there, I was able to return and rush the boss. As the way was clear, I easily sent Claire up to remove of Hestia as soon as possible, removing the biggest danger. From there, it was a simple task of removing the Cantor and baiting the commander to obtain victory. Now, because that battle pissed me off, and I know it's coming, I chose to take this moment to do some grinding. I know that it may seem unnecessary with how powerful I'm making my units, but every bit helps, especially when it's possible to screw yourself over in this game. While I do have this momentary period of grinding, I will also point out the secret shrine just east of Regale Falls. If you ever lose a unit, you can find a well here that revives them. With everyone now leveled up, and Grey, Lucas, and Clive brought to their 3rd tier classes, it's time to move on. Our next battle takes place on a fort with a similar layout to the one Celica attacked just before fighting Jeddah. I'll be honest, it's a pretty interesting map design as far as I've seen in Fire Emblem games. Practical for the enemy and forces you to think about what you're doing. At this point, Claire is in danger just being on the map. To take full advantage of the layout, the enemy has tons of bow knights. This wouldn't be too bad if it weren't for all of them being equipped with actual bow items, giving them all the anti-flyer ability. Since I don't have a bow knight or two of my own like usual, I had to create a new strategy for this map. By carefully baiting out the bow knights, I was able to use Tobin to take them out with a bit of support from Alm. With 2 prongs of the fort cleared, I had created a safe path to enter the heart of the fort. Thankfully, Lucas has a high defense and pretty reasonable speed for a Baron, so sending him forward as our wall was extremely helpful. Once inside the fort, it was just a matter of baiting the remaining enemies and taking them out. By removing the bow knights first, I was then able to make use of Claire to help bait out the Arcanists. And Gray was helpful here too, as he's a Dread fighter now. What really matters is our final battle of Act 4. I've always loved this battle against Rudolph. It's fun whether you're over-leveled or extremely under-leveled. And it was fun here too. I wasn't able to use my usual strat of attacking Rudolph with a bow knight to bait him across the map though, so I just stormed in. Alm and Lucas were able to act as a shield, blocking the entrance as enemies piled up on them. By carefully baiting the bow knights, I was thankfully able to snipe them with Tobin. Fighting Nuibaba is really starting to pay off. Love the mage ring. Once the cavalry was cleared, it was just a matter of fighting Rudolph. As he's a gold knight, his range is much larger than that of the barons around him, so it's easy to pull him away without aggroing other units. He has a tendency to target Alm, though it comes with the additional quirk of Rudolph never actually attacking Alm. When we kill him, we figure out why he's like that. Oops, we just committed patricide. Meissen tells us to get over our whole life being a lie, though, as we have Celica to save, closing off Act 4 of the game.
His whole story was a lie. Alm's youth, his days of training with Meissen, all were but calculations in a far-reaching plot by his Lord Father, Emperor Rudolph. Alm had taken his father's life, and that sadness would stay with him always. But destiny would not permit this son of the brand to simply walk away. Valentia lay yet in the grip of Duma, the wicked god, the war father, as well as Alm's dear Celica, who would become Duma's willing servant.
This is it, the end game. As we descend into the dungeon below, it's time to introduce our final forced recruit. Meissen joined our army at the very end of Act 4, and he's a gold knight. He's a serviceable enough unit for the end game. Decent stats with non-existent growths means he really just exists as a usable unit if you lost too many units, which... Anyways, we're left with no time to dwell on that as we run into the Berkut fight. This is honestly the thing that worried me the most, and has always been a bit of a wall for me. Luckily, the 2 boss enemies here are completely stationary, so it's just a matter of cleaning up around them and then focusing on the bosses. The biggest issue while doing so is that Rinea will summon witches during the fight. She can be baited out of doing so, though, as using Entrap takes priority. I was planning on taking advantage of this until I got too cocky and killed myself on her in Berkut. I did a small amount of grinding on some of my units and came back for round 2. I was a bit smarter about it and prevailed over Berkut. He has his dying moment, but it's best not to dwell. We have a dragon to kill. Past Berkut is a warp puzzle. I chose the Millipath first to get Gradivis and equip it on Clive. Moving forward, I take the correct warps to reach the door to the final boss. However, this door can't be opened without Celica, so I head over to the Royal Vault. The Royal Vault is a gauntlet for Alm to get through alone. It's intended to both give him a few levels if he needs them, but also act as a check to make sure he's strong enough to handle the final battle. The Lich is simple enough, as they and the Bonewalkers mean little to Alm's good defense. The same can be said for the Death Coils that followed. The only forced encounter that could ever be close to a problem is with the White Dragon. The dragons are a little issue for Alm thanks to his maxed out health and good defense. The real issue is the Arcanist healing the dragons and being annoying to take out. Still, it was all manageable, and at the end we find Milla and Celica. And hey, I remember this happening at the start of the game. Oops. It's all fine though as Milla pulls some strings, and you know what? I don't care if this moment is stupid or whatever. It's heartwarming to see these two. I respect them. With Celica and Falchion in hand, we're now able to head to the final battle. We run into Celica's 4 friends and prepare to fight. It's kind of funny entering this battle with 12 units knowing there are supposed to be more people here. Now, looking at this map, it seems like it should end in disaster. I mean, Marla and Hestia are back and able to summon witches. Jeddah is here being Jeddah, and there's Garn by Duma who has the Medusa spell. All problems just for trying to reach Duma, not to mention having to deal with Duma himself. But it's all very manageable. Infinite witches aren't exactly a problem when all of my units outspeed him. And yes, even Lucas outspeeds witches at this point. He has for a while now, actually. There are also Moguls everywhere, but they're not really a problem when they die in one hit. This map is about patience as you slowly make your way across the swamp to Duma. I take out most every unit along the way except Jeddah because Jeddah is not worth it with the party I have. My main plan to tackle the map was getting Saber and Gray up to Duma as quickly as possible. This was not for the purpose of fighting Duma, but to help bait Marla and Hestia so I could remove them quickly. This is also where I learned that the Dread Fighter's ability to have magic damage also applies to Medusa. Go! Use this knowledge for evil. With all of the annoyances around Duma taken care of, I try to corner him so Alm can come in and take him down. However, I ended up finding myself cornered when Duma started preparing to use Upheaval next turn. Seeing this, I decided it was my best chance to strike him down. Duma's health is over the max, so it's hard to see how much health he has left until he reaches 52 health. Not to mention he's invulnerable to all weapons except Falchion once he's below 52 HP. So I tried to shoot my shot and hope for just the right criticals to push Duma into killing range for Alm. Claire, Gray, Saber, and Celica attacked. There were a few lucky crits from the physical fighters, but most useful of all was a lucky critical with Celica's Thunder. Duma was at 39 health remaining, meaning it would all be up to Alm now. Falchion only did enough damage to bring him down to 3 health, but with so many friends nearby, Alm's crit rate was raised to 44. If he got just 1 crit off, Duma would be done. So I attacked, and
your great and weary soul the rest it deserves.
Take this!
with that, Duma is defeated, and the game beaten. Is it possible to beat the game using only forced recruits? Absolutely. In fact, it wasn't all that bad at all. If anything, this was a fun excuse for me to replay Echoes. I'm not nearly as good at this game as I'd like to be, but it holds a special place in my heart. If you're feeling confident about it, I'd recommend trying this run yourself. I'll admit I probably only did this well because I fully knew what I was doing when I was getting into this run, but being forced to use specific units was really fun. I hope you all enjoyed the ride with me, and if you want to recommend a stupid Fire Emblem challenge like this one, leave a comment below.